The Aston Martin DB9 is a total supercar bargain. You get a car that's absolutely gorgeous, that's powered by a V12, and this thing costs like what most new Hondas and Toyotas do today. So I think this is such a bargain that I actually bought this 2005 DB9 that I'm standing next to today. And what we're going to do today is we're going to do just a little review on it and go over why I think it's a good bargain, why I think it's a good car, and we're going to take it out for a little spin. My name is Breck, and you're watching The Chooches. As with all my reviews, I always like to go over what's been modified on the car before we dive into it too deep. The only thing that's been done to this car is one of the previous owners put these 20-inch Aston Black Label wheels on it. This is how I bought the car. I haven't had a chance to swap them out or anything yet. I don't know if I'm going to keep them or not. If I find a good deal on the stock wheels, I'll probably get a set of those again. Normally they'd be 19-inch wheels on this. That's the only thing that's been changed out. Otherwise, everything you see here is completely stock, and someone put a clear bar on it, but you're not going to be able to tell that in the video anyway. So let's go over a quick history of the DB9. Now, the DB9 was originally released at the 2003 Frankfurt Motor Show, and it was a replacement for the outgoing DB7, which had been made for about 10 years up until that point. It was a pretty big step up from the DB7, as you can imagine. It was about 25% lighter and had twice the torsional rigidity. And because of that, Aston Martin decided they wanted to call it the DB9, not the DB8, because it was such a big step up. In reality, they probably also wanted to call it the DB9 because if they called it the DB8, people might think it has a V8, not a V12, and that probably caused some problems as well. Now, this car was substantial to Aston Martin for a number of reasons. For one, they were opening up a new factory called the Gaydon plant, and two, they were testing out this new platform called the VH platform. VH stands for vertical horizontal, which is not very creative, but this was the first car to be built in that plant and end up using that platform. Because of this was significant for a number of reasons. One, they used this VH platform in like almost every car they were coming out with after that, and they were also building almost every car in this new plant. Now, the DB9 actually had to go through a 1,000,000-mile test program when they came out with it. They were trying to test it through like Death Valley, taking it in the snow, all sorts of crazy stuff, just because they really wanted to get it fine-tuned, and they ultimately knew that they were putting a pretty big investment into this platform in general. Between 2004 and 2016, Aston Martin made about 16,500 DB9s, and there are a few differences throughout the years. This one's a 2005. There's really not that much, and ultimately when it was replaced by the DB11, that was also a pretty big step up from the DB9. One of the most important elements of a supercar is the design, and this car is certainly no exception. The DB9 was designed by Ian Callum and Henrik Fisker. You may recognize the name Henrik Fisker because he has started Fisker Automotive like twice. It's went under both times. I think it's going under again, and not very good at running a car company. But let me tell you something, he can certainly design a car very, very well. I mean, this car is just drop dead gorgeous. I could go on and on and on about how much I like the styling of this car, but I'm not going to for the sake of the video. Now, the idea behind the design, they said, was to make it look like it was milled out of a single block of aluminum. And when you look closely at this car, there's a lot of very small details that really do make you realize there's a lot of attention to detail here. A few other small details on the DB9. So one, you have these heat extractors on the hood here. They're both functional. Definitely feel the heat coming from them. Nice little touch there. Number two, the car was actually designed so there's no visible areas for the water to run off. You won't notice some crazy channels or anything like that. It's all worked into the body of the car, and it looks very smooth. Another detail that I'm a big fan of is the exhaust system in the back here. You'll notice it actually comes through the rear fascia instead of coming out of the bottom or some other area like that. The one thing I don't like is these plastic things right here. They're not on the Euro cars from what I can tell. I don't really know why. It's probably some US regulation, but that is the one small thing I would nitpick on an overall gorgeous, and I mean absolutely gorgeous, design. And my final favorite element of the exterior design of the DB9 is the doors. So when you open the door up, you'll notice it goes up at a slight angle, 12 degrees to be exact. Aston Martin calls these the swan doors, so it kind of looks like a swan's wings when they are both up. Now, even though this looks cool, it's actually got a little bit of a function to it too. Because the car is low, they don't want you to hit any curb. You know, if you're at a tall curb, you open the door, they don't want the bottom of the door to accidentally hit the curb. So I'm making it go up just a little bit. You get plenty of clearance on the bottom. And you don't have to worry about hitting anything down there. And obviously, it's a supercar. Doors that kind of go up look cool. Not as flashy as like a Lamborghini, scissor door or something like that. But I still think it's a very classy and subtle touch that's pretty cool. The final thing I want to touch on before we crawl inside the car is the suspension and brakes. So you'll notice they have these nice Aston Martin branded red calipers for the brakes. These are actually supplied by Brembo, which is a very well-known brake company, and they're 4-piston calipers front and back. Fortunate part with the Brembo brakes, they are obscenely dusty. That's the thing with all Brembos. Obviously, they work well, but if you like keeping your wheels clean, they're going to suck. Suspension-wise, the car rides on a four-wheel independent suspension and has double wishbones on all four corners. As we climb inside the DB9, there is one thing I want to mention, and that is the particular spec of this vehicle. Now, it was kind of hard to find the exact information on what the original sticker would have been. I kind of had to do some digging. But base price on these in 2005 is about $157,000. This one was probably optioned out to about $170,000 or so. A couple things you notice has the premium audio system, which actually is supposed to adjust based on the pressure in the cabin. It's 950 watt, so you'll see the speakers on the doors here. Some of them don't have it. There's also a couple options for like different woods and stuff. This is piano black. But overall, I'll put a nice list of the spec on the screen. This is a pretty well-equipped example, so do keep in mind that there may be a couple things that this one has that not every single DB9 may. Alright, so climbing into the DB9, there's a few things that you'll kind of notice. One, these seats. The front seats are 10-way power adjustable. They're very comfortable. They do have a nice little bit of bolster to them, but overall, I think they're designed a little more for comfort over sport. But you'll notice a few weird things right off the bat. One, there's a button here on the side of the dashboard that is for a reduced alarm mode. This car has a very sensitive alarm system. I guess the thought is if you're leaving somebody in the car locked, if they're moving around, it might set the alarm off. So you can use that to make the alarm a little bit less sensitive and not go off if you're leaving somebody in the car. You also notice you get these nice DB9 hand-built in England sill plates. They're in a nice spot to make sure they don't get scratched up. And then you also notice that the e-brake is on the side of the driver's seat here. Now, one thing that's kind of odd about it is when you go to engage it and you put it down, it's still engaged. You actually have to bring it back up, press the button, and put it back down to disengage it. It kind of clears up some space up here, and it also makes it so you can easily lift your leg over it if it's engaged and you are getting out of the car. You'll also notice that this has a nice steering wheel, very nice looking. The cruise control is optional, sits right here. And then you'll take a look. The first cool design element is this gorgeous gauge cluster. So there are a few cool items with this gauge cluster. The biggest thing that you'll notice when you look at them is that the speedometer and tachometer are what's called reverse sweep, meaning they basically go backwards. Now, the speedometer shows up to 220 miles an hour. That is quite a bit shy of this car's 186 mile an hour top speed, but it's still very cool to look at nonetheless. Additionally, you'll notice you have two little displays here as well. The one on the left just shows some basic information, the odometer, if you're in park, reverse, neutral drive, or anything like that. The one on the right, you can scroll through a couple different things. You can show the speed, the average speed, the fuel economy, all that sort of stuff. I have noticed the speedometer, the digital one's actually a little bit laggy compared to the regular one, so I don't really use it all that much, but it is still there if you want to do it. You'll also notice that there's a little screen on the very top of the gauge cluster. It's a circular screen, and that will show what gear you're in when you're using the paddles. Now, speaking of the paddles, this car is equipped with a 6-speed automatic transmission. The DB9 was also offered in a 6-speed manual, but they are exorbitantly rare. I'm talking only a few hundred of these cars were built compared to thousands and thousands of the ones with the automatic. Now, we'll talk more about how it drives in a moment, but you'll notice you have two paddle shifters, a downshift and an upshift on the steering wheel here. They are fixed to the column, not the actual wheel itself, so you do not have to worry about knowing where they're at when you turn. They stay fixed in place, and they do make a very satisfying mechanical click when you pull them. There's also a sport button down here, kind of in the center console area, and when you put it in sport, the shift speeds will dramatically increase, and we'll talk about that a little more too. Another very 2005 feature of this car is the built-in navigation system. Now, you'll notice here, it takes a minute for it to come to life sometimes. And it needs a little help up. It's got ED or something. Now, the most notable thing about this nav screen is that it is absolute garbage. Now, this is actually DVD powered, and there's a DVD player in the trunk that you put the navigation discs in. But, I mean, you can just take a look at this thing here. We'll go into map mode, and, I mean, it is just truly awful by today's standards. I mean, I'm sure this was very cool in 2005, but, like, this is just really rough. And I don't even know how you would about to go of typing in an address in this thing. I mean, this would be awful. It'd be like texting on a phone from 2005 to enter any sort of address or anything like that. But the best part about this navigation system is that you can just hit a couple buttons and it'll go away and you never have to look at it ever again. Moving on down, another weird feature of the DB9 is that you actually have buttons for park, reverse, neutral, and drive instead of some sort of lever. You also have your glass engine start button, which feels very nice and lights up bright at night, but you still have to enter the regular key in the ignition there. Other than that, this is a very nice, elegant very timeless looking interior. I mean, this kind of gives it away, this radio screen and the CD slot. It does have a 6-disc CD changer, but overall I think it's just very classy and tries to stay very well composed. Now, another odd thing with the DB9 is you'll notice, as I kind of showed the navigation screen, you have like this keypad here. Now you can use this to like save the radio stations and stuff like that, but there's also a slot for a SIM card, and what you could do back in 2005 is just put your SIM card in here and you have your own little car phone here. Unfortunately, I have not been able to try that out since my phone doesn't even use a SIM card anymore. Kind of a weird thing with the DB9. But moving on, just some very simple features. You have automatic climate control, a couple buttons for a few various vehicle functions down there. You have this weird little storage slot. It's like for a ring or something. It's not even like deep or anything. I don't really know what the point is. Cubby here, another cubby here. And you have your buttons for traction control, sport mode, and your parking sensors down below. Another very odd thing with the DB9 is your seat controls are kind of on the side here. And then you also have some controls for your heated seat and your lumbar support down on the side. Now on the passenger side, there's nothing really notable to note besides the fact that you have an electronic glove box. But what's even more interesting is that if you open this electronic glove box, you'll notice that the owner's manual in here is the weirdest shaped owner's manual you'll have ever seen in your entire life. I mean, why is it shaped like this? Why is it like held together with screws? Very odd choice to make it look like this. The one thing I didn't notice going through this owner's manual when I bought it in the section of obnoxiously long how to use this complicated navigation is that for this example of where to go, the name is Bond Motors, which is a nice reference to James Bond using an Aston Martin in most of the James Bond movies. Kind of a nice touch. Now, the last interior item to note is that the fact that this car has back seats. This is technically a 2+2 configuration. There's a lever back here to flip the seat forward, and you will notice that this is the most useless back seat probably ever put into a production car. I'm actually going to slip my shoes off to get into this because I don't want to scuff up the back of the seat here. But this seat, I don't think was actually intended for a live human. I'm like, I don't know, 5'10" maybe. On the best day, 5'9" probably. And, I mean, that's where I normally sit. And I have like zero legroom. I could not physically put the seat back to where I would normally sit back here. This is also as straight up as I can sit. And the only nice thing about this is that at least I have a suede headliner to hit my head against instead of a crappy like cloth one or something. Absolutely useless back here. I don't know how anybody, even a child, could fit back here. And because of those back seats, I can't help but think you get absolutely robbed on trunk space. I mean, look at this trunk. This is probably twice as big if you didn't have to worry about those stupid back seats. However, I can't complain too much. It's a supercar. You're lucky to even have a trunk in the first place, but you can't really put too much in it. Now, there's a few other weird things to note about this trunk. One, you have this smart tire TPMS system. This car is probably very early on in the TPMS system, live monitoring days. So you get kind of this weird system that's mounted in the trunk and not in the gauge cluster or anything like this. You also have a fire extinguisher. That was optional. You have a first aid toolkit thing that's still in the original bubble wrap. I believe that was optional as well. You notice the DVD player for it, the navigation system. But the coolest thing is this Aston Martin branded umbrella. Now, I'm not an umbrella guy per se, but this umbrella is pretty awesome. It says Aston Martin even on the little button here. It says Aston Martin on the handle. And this is like the most heavy duty, I don't know how to use an umbrella apparently, most heavy duty umbrella I've ever seen in my life. It's absolutely massive. And it matches the color scheme of the car as well. And it also shoots down like a missile. The last weird trunk related thing is this panel in the back. So it's nice because you have a spot to plug in your trickle charger and you also have a 12-volt power outlet. But there's a little battery button and it's for the battery disconnect. And the first time I pressed it, I tried pushing it back to turn it back on and it didn't work. And after trying to figure out what was wrong with the car, none of the electronics worked, the glove box stays closed, disables a whole bunch of electronics in the car. I found out that the button to release it, you have to pull the passenger rear seat bottom off and there's an unlabeled yellow button in there. It'd make for a good anti-theft thing, but why would they put it all the way in there and not just make it the same button? I have no clue. And now we get to the heart of the beast. This thing is powered by a 5.9 liter naturally aspirated 48 valve quad cam V12. Now this V12 was designed in conjunction with Ford, who owned Aston Martin at the time, and it's kind of like just two Ford 6-cylinders put together to make a 12, but we're not going to talk about that really. Now, one weird thing that Aston Martin chose to do with this car was put a 6.0 liter V12 badge on the engine cover. However, it should technically be 5.9 liters because the total engine displacement is 5,935 cc's, which means it should have been rounded down. Now, I made a YouTube short talking about this, and I got a bunch of people clowning me for some reason, saying, oh, every car does that. Doesn't mean they should. So this car was factory rated at 450 horsepower and 420 pound-feet of torque. And the power is actually sent to the rear wheels through a carbon fiber drive shaft, which I think is pretty cool. Now, when you look at this car, you'll notice a couple things. One, the engine is about as far back and far low as they could possibly put it. There is a substantial amount of space from the front of the car to where the engine starts. And that actually allows this car to have a 50-50 weight distribution, which is pretty cool. Now, one thing that I will acknowledge when we're talking about V12s and the cost of this car being a bargain is that it is a little bit more expensive to maintain. The dealer I bought it from sent me the invoice for when they did the oil change on it, and they would have billed $725 just for the oil change if I would have done it through them. Now, obviously, you could probably get it done a bit cheaper through an independent shop, but there is still some substantial maintenance costs associated with running a V12. It should also be noted that the fuel economy is horrible. However, if you're going to complain about fuel economy on a V12, it's kind of like complaining about how you got wet because you decided to go swimming. And my last favorite little detail from this Aston Martin is that they put a plaque of the gentleman who did the final inspection on the car when it was new, Mr. Paul Goodard. Thank you for inspecting my car, sir. If anything goes wrong, I'm blaming you. All right, let's take this thing for a drive. All right, so driving the DB9. So we're going to start in regular drive, not using the paddles. We're also going to start in regular mode, not sport. Now, the first thing that I noticed when I got this car, one of the first things I noticed, is that it's just incredibly smooth. Now, I drive a Wrangler every day, so I'm used to things just being like awful and uncomfortable. And one of the things I absolutely enjoy about this car the most is that when I go take it out for a spin, it's just so smooth. I can go 70 miles an hour on the highway, and it is quiet, it's comfortable, and it's like the best thing to drive around like that. Now, you'd also notice like the suspension ride's pretty nice for this car. It does handle pretty nice as well, but it's definitely a little more comfortable than some other super crazy sports cars. Now, I personally think it handles pretty nice, and we'll talk about that in a moment. We'll go to somewhere a little more curvy roads. But I actually don't think it's too bad. I think it's a good mix for what the car is of comfort while also being performance-oriented. Like I said, when you're in this regular mode, you can just drive it around like it's a normal car for the most part. I mean, it's still a little low. You're still a little cognizant of that, but it's really not too bad, and you can kind of just enjoy it. Now, if you do want to use the paddles, all you have to do is you just simply pull one of them, either the upshift or the downshift, at any time, and you'll notice it switches the center thing in the middle there to say whatever gear you're in, and then it'll also show in the area down below. So you just pull it. I'm in first gear now, and now I will have to use the paddles moving forward. Now, one thing I will say I'm not a fan of with this transmission is that it does seem a little laggy on takeoff. When you first hit the gas, you do feel like there's a little bit of lag, and I do feel like if you just slammed on the gas from like a standstill, I think it'd be a little rough. I think it might, not do the best, which that's unfortunate. That's just part of the era, right? I mean, any car from 2005, like the Gallardos, for example, people are always slamming on the E-gears with those, talking about how they're just not the best. Now, there was a 6-speed manual available on this car, and I do think that would probably improve the experience of this car. However, those are substantially more. When I say substantially, at least 50% more. In some cases, I've seen some of those sell for over $100,000, where the nicest DB9 automatic is probably still going to be capped probably $70,000 if it was a super, super low mile one. But realistically, most of these are probably right around $50,000. Now, one thing that you can do is you can put it in a sport mode, and that will substantially increase the shift speeds, whether you're in drive or in manual mode. And I think that that is very necessary for when you are driving this car. You'll also notice you don't really hear the engine all that much because it's got an active exhaust. And you will hear it when you go above about 3,500 RPM. Now, suppose I think there's like a fuse or something you can pull out, and they'll supposedly make it like sound way better. And I might have to do that because this thing is very, very quiet. Almost too quiet, I would say. Now, I'm going to do a U-turn here, and I'm going to do a nice little acceleration. I'll open up the valves a little bit. All right, and here we go. Wow, that traction in third gear, that was awesome. It pulls great. I mean, it pulls great. The smoothness of the V12 is absolutely phenomenal. And we lost a little traction there in first, and it's lost traction when we shifted into third. But, you know, the traction control system is pretty good on this car. It's not too bad. It's nothing, you know, it works. That's important, right? You can fully disable with the button there. Obviously, I'm not driving on a track or something today, so there's no point. Now, I think that the car, by today's standards, it's probably a little slow. And I mean, and when I say a little slow, I mean, it's still 450 horsepower, but you got Hellcats that are 700, 800 horsepower these days. I mean, there's a lot of power out there. You got Teslas that are, you know, blowing the doors off. It's not today fast, but it's still very quick. And I think the best thing that you get with this V12 is that you get just a crazy smooth experience. When you're rolling onto the gas, it's so smooth. The noise is great when you get it up to those RPMs. It drives me nuts. That's so. I wish when you put it in sport mode, it just left the valves open on the exhaust. That is one of my least favorite things about this car. Is how quiet it is. You know, you have this great naturally aspirated V12, and you can't hear it unless you're really getting on it, which kind of sucks. Brakes wise, I'll put it in regular automatic for this, just so I can do it. They grab. I mean, the brakes are. This is a heavy car. This car weighs almost 3,800 pounds. The brakes definitely help. I would say you feel the weight of it when you're just driving normally and you are braking. You do feel the weight of it, but the brakes are there and they will help you out if you need it. This car stickered for, like I said, about $170,000 back in 2005. A Gallardo was stickered for about the same, and this is about half the price of a Gallardo. So keep in mind, like, this is all the supercar of 2005, but it's one of the cheapest ones you can get. You can't get a Ferrari 360 or 430 for this price. You can't get a Gallardo. You definitely can't get like a Murcielago or something for this price. And it's absolutely great. I mean, I think this car drives fantastically well. If I had to knock it on a couple things, you do feel the weight. Like I said, 3,800 pounds. You'll feel a little bit. And the transmission can be a little slow. But I'm going to tell you something right now. If you think that the transmission ruins the car, you're wrong. It is manageable. It is not the worst thing you're ever going to drive. It still shifts relatively quick. And I think it's still very enjoyable to drive. I'm a big manual guy. I mean, I really prefer a manual transmission in almost any case possible. But in this scenario, I mean, you're going to pay, in some cases, double for a manual transmission car. And I don't know if the value is there at that point. I think that you can get such a good deal on these because of the automatic, and I think that's kind of wrong. I think that people are looking too much into the automatic, and I think that's kind of a mistake, to be honest. All right, so handling-wise, so we're kind of on a little bit of a twisty road here. Not going to do anything too crazy. So you do feel a weight a lot in the corners. Now, it is, like I said, 50-50 weight distribution. It actually handles well given the proportions of the car. Surprisingly well given how long the front nose is. But it's definitely not like a Porsche or a Lotus or something crazy like that handling-wise. I definitely think you do get some enjoyment taking it through the corners, kind of going through a little bit one quick here. It stays pretty flat. But keep in mind, too, as I said before, this car is designed to also be a little bit more comfortable. It's not purely just a sports car where it's like go around the corner as fast as you can. This is also designed to be a little bit more comfortable and usable on a daily basis. Could you daily drive this? If you lived in a warm climate, absolutely. I don't see any reason why you couldn't. Once again, you will have some higher maintenance costs. And, you know, it's still a low sports car, and you might scrape every now and then if you're not careful. Thankfully, I don't think I've scraped this car at all yet. It's pretty reasonable for a sports car. And I really just think overall it's a great car to drive for the value. I cannot stress that enough. This car, I do not think there's many cars you can buy in this price range that will give you the V12 and that drives the way this car drives. I think this car is a value, and I think if you are looking for a cool supercar for your first supercar maybe, or you're just looking to have another supercar, I think that this car provides a tremendous amount of value. So that's my thoughts on the 2005 Aston Martin DB9. And honestly, I am thrilled to have been able to have purchased this car. I'm very excited to continue to drive it, and I really just don't see a world where you'll be able to buy a naturally aspirated V12 Aston Martin that looks as good as this for this kind of money. I mean, I don't think these cars are going to stay where they're at for long. You can still get one of these well under $50,000 if you find the right deal. Even a really, really nice one, automatic, 60 maybe. I think it's a great deal. I don't foresee these going down in value. I think they're only going to go up with the lack of V12s that are going to be continued to be produced. And I really think that this is going to be one hell of a deal for anyone who chooses to buy one. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you have a car for me to review, I am in the Chicagoland area. Please email us at the email below. I'll be more than happy to try to set something up and come out for review it. But thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. No, sixth gear. If you have cruise on, oh gosh. Oh, everyone's looked at my ass. I should start an OnlyFans.